here we are in conversation with the fantastic Liana Stewart. I just want to say very quickly a big thank you to Cables and Cameras, Gary Thompson, Alex for BFI Network, and Film Cymru Wales for being involved in this particular conversation and event, and getting this together and allowing this to take place. I'm particularly excited about this conversation because just researching Liana's work, I also find that there's a bit of a personal thread here as well, being a mixed race male and watching Liana's documentary, which is on BBC iPlayer, Black and Welsh, and it just it blew my mind. So I'm sort of slightly personally invested in this because I can't think of the last time I saw a documentary really do justice to a contemporary portrait of Black community and Black experience outside of the capital. So first off, Liana, thank you so much for being here with us. I have a quote. I don't think being the first is important. What's important is not being the one and only. And this is a quote from your documentary, Black and Welsh. And this is the former city councillor.
Yeah, that's one of my favourite lines, actually.
Gaynor.
My favourite line. Yeah, from Gaynor Lagol.
Gaynor Lagol.
Yeah, she's a real force to be reckoned with. And actually, she was at school with my mum and my auntie, and she's always been someone in the community who fought for equality, and has been someone who, I was really chuffed to have her as part of the documentary. She didn't actually want to be in it. She said,
oh, wow.
Can't get someone younger. And I said, no, I want you in it. And she said, yeah, but I always talk, people always want me to talk about the community and the Black community specifically. So she wanted someone else to have the opportunity. And I said, well, I want you to do it. And then she was only going to play actually a really small part in the documentary, which is giving a history to the community where we come from, Butetown and Cardiff. And actually she gave so much more. And when I watch her piece throughout the whole documentary, every time I well up, even when you read out her line, I just felt it just gets me every time. It just means so much to me.
I put this on iPlayer on a big screen. I encourage my folks to check it out, and that's the moment that made my mum well up. I think it hit her really hard. She was like, wow, this is so important and powerful and about kind of generational exchange. So we're already there. We're already talking about your documentary, Black and Welsh. So it's still available on BBC iPlayer for a few months. So
yeah.
I highly encourage people to just make sure you watch this documentary. It's so important. And I would even say, what I find so important about this is it's one of those sort of beautiful portrait documentaries, which is incredibly intimate. You don't have to be part of the Black community to watch this documentary and not be completely blown away by it, and the rich kind of tapestry of the subjects that kind of warmly engage with you in the process of the kind of narrative arc of the documentary. So first off, I mean, these are some sort of just thoughts, responses that I'd written down. I loved the archive footage and photos in the documentary. They remind me of my own family photos. It's so important to see yourself and people like yourself on screen, and to see and hear those stories in moving image in media, in documentaries and fiction film. I absolutely loved seeing everyone's different skin tones, accents, hearing everyone's generational and diasporic experiences. I found it really enriching and a really reaffirming experience, and just so refreshing to see, because I just feel it kind of, you know, I'm an old git, I'm in my 40s, and I've dreamt of either, you know, being part of the research of a documentary like this, just being able to see a documentary like this. So it's like I feel so like over the moon that you know, I'm alive to see someone do something so passionate and unique. I liked what Lauren Henry, managing director of Urban Circle, says in the doc. My mother as her role model. Who are some of your role models, Liana?
Oh, my grandmother. My grandmother, who was mixed race, so her father was from Barbados, and she was just unapologetic, and she pushed us to be whatever we wanted to be, and as long as you had a job, she was fine with you. You just needed to work. that was her thing.
Yeah.
So she was one of my biggest role models growing up, I think. But as far as, you know, in the media, it was really only like Black Americans, I'd say, you know, Whitney being the biggest one for me personally. And, you know, as I got to like my late teens, then Rosa Parks was one of them, but there was no one British, and definitely no one sort of Black and Welsh. You know, we have Shirley Bassey, but I didn't really see her as a role model. Didn't really come to Wales a lot, I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, what's the definition between Butetown and Tiger Bay? Because I mean, I was talking to a friend recently, and we'd always known it as Tiger Bay. So is there a differential between Butetown and Tiger Bay, or is there a reason?
I asked Gaynor this. I was like, Gaynor, what is it? Because actually I grew up calling it the docks. My generation wouldn't call it Tiger Bay. I'd say it was probably like people who were 50 plus who'd call it Tiger Bay, really.
Oh wow.
So I'd always call it the docks. But it'd all be under the umbrella of Butetown. So I think Tiger Bay and the docks are nicknames for Butetown. It's really called Butetown. If you look on the map, it's Butetown. But Tiger Bay sounds best, I think. And you know, when I say where I'm from, I never say the docks unless I'm in Cardiff. I'll always say Butetown or Tiger Bay.
Yeah, I mean, you know, growing up in the Southwest, if someone said Tiger Bay, you knew where that person, the location that person was talking about. And talking to certain friends, it's kind of like that's why I really wanted to sort of ask that question.
Oh mate, honestly, like everyone sort of a certain age will call themselves like Bay boys or Bay girls, you know, or they'll say it's a Tiger Bay in you, like, you know, that's and we're all really proud of it. Honestly, you can go anywhere, you can find us all around the world, and there's always these happy stories, no matter how people were brought up, which was most of the time in poverty, you know. Not all the time, but a lot of the time it would be, or your parents or your grandparents from extreme poverty. But there's all these stories which are fantastic, you know, which I love. Everyone's a storyteller from the Bay, from Tiger Bay.
Yeah, that's a very poignant thing to say at the end there, because it's kind of narrative. It strikes me that storytelling is very important to yourself as well, and that leads me on to my next question, actually, which is what does the term representation mean to you, in the sense of maybe to begin with being Black and mixed race, because it feels as if you've kind of explored that a little bit with what we've just talked about. And, you know, I love what you've just said about that whole vibe of kind of, we're all proud to be storytellers from where we're from, you know. Does that lead into what you might feel about what representation is I think in relation to kind of film, in relation to yourself as a Black mixed race woman?
I think ultimately it's pride. It's having this pride and confidence in who you are as a person, and also your upbringing and culture play a huge part of that. You know, when I was like, I don't know, I must have been about 7 or 8, I went to Arabic school, not because we were Muslim, but because I wanted to go there because some of my friends went there. And it was fine, you know, I could go there, went there for a summer, I think. I just remember Aleph Ba Ta, which is ABC. It's ABC or 1 2 3, I think it's ABC. And it was, I was always extremely proud to come from a really multicultural community. And I think that is representation for me. I've never been embarrassed by it. I've always been really proud. And, you know, Tiger Bay does not have the best reputation in Wales or in South Wales. It really doesn't. But we all seem to fly this flag because we have a very special community, and it certainly empowered me. You know, I've always felt like I had people who'd have my back. You know, like even moving to London and not being in Wales at all. You know, I have people who are extremely proud and support me, and I might not have seen them for years and years. And my mum will bump into someone and they'll say, "Oh, really proud of what she's done." And, you know, so yeah, for me, representation is pride and that confidence in who you are as a person. And, you know, I think especially when you're mixed race, I think that's when you can be really torn, and that's what we explored in the documentary. You know, I was extremely lucky to grow up in a place where, you know, I know my heritage, I am mixed race. I've always identified as Black, but it's never been something I felt I had to really question. And I think that's down to my family. You know, that's down to being proud that we have Chinese food sometimes, and you know, I didn't know that it wasn't normal to have soy sauce with a roast dinner. I just thought that was quite normal until I was a teenager.
Yeah, I can think of similar, like because that's a part of the mixed race experience. I mean, I can think of similar combinations, and we could probably do that kind of like food association mixed raceness thing, you know, where it's like, oh, I thought everybody did that, and it's not that way. But you know, but that's what makes us unique, and I think it's part of what makes you unique as a filmmaker, Liana. But I was looking at your website and looking at your show reel already. It's just like an excellent body of work, and just clocking up all of these really, just a great portfolio. You know, it's BBC, Channel 4. It feels as if things are really starting to kind of move forward for you. The thing that really struck me, and I thought this was, I thought it's fantastic because, and I came to it after watching Black and Welsh and after looking at your show reel, and it's the descriptor of your kind of portfolio and CV pitch, which is observational, character-led documentary filmmaker. And there's something in that I sense in sort of talking with you now and just looking at the moments within the edit of Black and Welsh, because there are a few moments where the camera sort of lingers on yourself, and we were able to kind of access or get closer to the subjects on screen. So these really confident shots of you, you know, setting up the camera and engaging with the subjects. There's some great sort of reverse shots of of your facial responses to the subjects. And it strikes me that observational character-led documentary filmmaker really is what you are. I mean,
it took me a long time to get to that, though, because people would sort of ask what I like to make, and people still ask in job interviews, what type of documentaries do you like? And I actually just love unique characters. Yes, I will have more of a connection with the Black community, for me personally, I will, and Welsh people, they're the two really that I connect with the most. But it's characters, and characters come in all shapes and forms and all different colors and languages and countries. And that's what I love, because I just feel like there's these unique stories in sometimes the most, I don't know, like a person you wouldn't think would have that story. I'm always quite attracted to the quiet one in the corner. I want to know what their story is, because I'm like quite an extrovert. I'm out there, but actually I find that the people who may not be so in your face have much more interesting stories, or rather I want to find what those stories are. Maybe that's what it is.
Cool. I mean, how have you adapted that drive around your kind of like technical approach to covering, to kind of once you've become sort of intimate with your subject? I mean, what kind of equipment would you normally roll with when you're thinking like, maybe I've got to approach this particular individual in a certain kind of way, but to get the material, are there any things that you've kind of, I mean, obviously don't give any away any like,
oh no,
it's
not that secret, honestly.
What's your what's your approach on the build up to actually sort of meeting up with a subject and tracking them?
Well, sometimes you don't have a lot of time, so I'd say that I always try and be very clear on what I want to do. So that's usually in a phone call, and sometimes I've actually taught people out of doing it, because I'll say things like, talk to your parents or talk to your friends about it, tell them what I've told you. And then I've had it a few times where someone's texted me then going, actually, I don't want to do it now. And I think that's great, because you should only want to be part of a documentary if it serves you as well. If it doesn't, and you're just doing it for someone else or to be famous, maybe it's maybe not going to work. There has to be a reason behind it. So I like to be really honest from the moment I speak to people. And then when it comes to filming, you try, if you have time, I like to do a test day, or 30 minutes or an hour, and I'll use my camera, Sony FS7, and it'll just be me, maybe one other person, and we just have a chat on camera. And most people are really, really nervous, and then they'll be like, oh, is that it? And it's like, yeah, it's just a test. How are you doing? And then you see how they feel to it, how they respond. They might not enjoy it. Most of the time people do. Yesterday, I did an interview, and the woman said, this feels weird. And I was like, what do you mean? And said, well, it feels like a counseling session that I'm not paying. I was like, okay, well, she's like, why am I telling you this? I said, I don't know. I don't know why you're telling me this, So she just felt that she had the space to share. And I think it's having that safe space, feeling like it's a safe space, even though it's quite strange having a camera and a stranger in your home or in your circle. It's very weird, especially when you're talking about traumatic things or things that maybe you haven't shared with a lot of people. What do you get a lot of the time, and I'm sure a lot of other documentary filmmakers would say the same. You get people saying that they haven't told anyone that before. And it's just because you're listening, and you're not part of their inner circle. You know, you're someone who's outside of that. So, you know, you are almost like a counselor in a sense. You know, you're just someone who's listening and really interested in their life. So they want to share things. So yeah, so I'd do that. I'd have a conversation on the phone, then maybe do a test shoot with them, see how you feel after that. And then if someone's vulnerable, as in maybe has certain mental health conditions, or is an addict of some sort, then you have to be very clear on the relationship that you have, because sometimes people latch onto you because they may not have anyone else, or
so very clear about boundaries.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the most
it's
the trickiest thing about documentary filmmaking. You know, there's you know, a lens, there's glass that separates from you and the subject, yourself and the action, but you know, there is a very real relationship that takes place through that either digital or analog piece of equipment. There's still two human beings attached at either end. So finding that distance, I mean, it's
really hard. It's a really hard balance, I find, because, you know, you go home to your life and they're still living theirs. So they can't sometimes understand why aren't you my best friend? Because that's how you see, you know, you seem like you're my best friend. Or they might question, you know, you're just getting paid to be here. And that's true. I am in some cases. So, well, most of the time I will be. So it's quite hard sometimes. And
are there any strategies that you've employed to kind of help you with that process, both for yourself and the subject, you know?
I think it's just, it is literally just clarity. And, you know, sometimes it may seem really harsh, you know, like, you know, just to let you know that I'm here to film, and just keep reminding them what you're doing, even if that's every time you film. It's just remember what I'm doing here, and why are you doing this, and then you kind of hopefully will come to some kind of understanding in the end. I think that's it. But sometimes you don't have a lot of time. You know, I'm doing some new stuff now, and you just don't have time to build relationships with people, which is a real frustration of mine. So, you know, you just drop in for a few hours and then you're out again. And you know, they have to share some often really traumatic things. And I feel really guilty about that, you know, just dropping in and then swanning off. It just doesn't feel okay sometimes. Even though they totally understand, you know, you're working, but I sometimes take on that kind of guilt. Feel a bit bad doing it. But, you know, part of the job.
Yes, and there are some questions further down the line which kind of revolve around that, but we'll get into that in a moment, and we can kind of relate it back to those particular experiences around your kind of craft and discipline. It's stuff around networking, but we'll get into that. We'll get into that a bit later. And it's very, very important, because I think the life of a documentary filmmaker, it comes with its own unique sets of challenges and pressures.
Strange. Sometimes a little bit.
I was just gonna. There's one sort of lingering question around Black and Welsh, which is just to give the folks who are watching this just a very kind of like rough idea of just, you know, the process for the shoot, you know, from pre-production to kind of post. How long did the project take to kind of to kind of put together?
Oh, do you know what? Actually, I must point out that Black and Welsh was very much inspired by Black and Scottish, and you guys should check that out. I think it's still on iPlayer, I'm not sure. But that was a fantastic documentary. And so a producer in Wales, Catrin Ramasut from Production, she contacted me and was like, we should be doing a Welsh version. Why hasn't there been one done? You know, we have one of the oldest Black communities in the country. What's going on? And then I was like, yeah, we should. And we wrote a pitch in February last year. Then it went to BBC Wales, and then the pandemic hit, so it kind of was on hold. It wasn't really greenlit. And then a few months later, they gave us some development money, and we had, I think it was 4 weeks to develop it further. But that 4 weeks was basically the start of casting for the documentary. I think they knew they wanted to greenlight it, and so that 4 weeks was just looking at cast. Actually, it was 2 weeks. It wasn't 4 weeks. It was 2 weeks. It was looking at cast and, you know, thinking about how we do it, what type of style we'd go for, and, you know, and then it got greenlit. And then in July, we had 4 weeks to do the casting. We shot it over 8 days in Cardiff at Chapter Art Centre. And it's an old, like, Victorian, I think it was a school. The part of the building was a school. And I just absolutely loved it. And I really was obsessed with having green in it. It's not like it's my favorite color or anything. It's just, when I think of Wales, I think of green and green grass of Wales, and so I just wanted some form of green in it. And
it's a fantastic location.
Yeah.
I mean, the light and the kind of you know, the color palette of the location and stuff is, yeah, it's very, very cool.
Yeah, and I have to give props to the producer for that one, because she showed me that initially, and I said, no, I want something else. And then, because I was in London and she was in Cardiff, so she had to go around and look at a few places. And then when I got to Cardiff, she said to me, do you want to have a look at that space now you're here? And I was like, all right then. And then as soon as I walked in, I was like, I love it. And she said, I showed you this weeks ago and you made it first. And I was like, oh, I know, sorry. So yeah, so we shot it over 8 days, and it was quite an intense 8 days. You know, it was, we weren't in a lockdown, but there was still restrictions. And so we obviously had to follow them, and having that huge space made it a lot easier, because we could maintain a social distance. And I think that's why, you know, there's quite big wides in it, because we just played with that, really. The fact that we just had this space, we had the social distance, so let's just make these huge wides, and that's what we did. And you know, it was I wouldn't say it was a risk for BBC Wales, but it was not something that they usually do. But the commissioner there, Jan Harris, was absolutely fantastic, and she just said to me, make this how you want to make it. And
oh wow,
we were really lucky, because she gave us that space.
That's one of those rare moments of creative freedom.
Yeah,
that's
I know.
fantastic.
I'm not going to get that again in telly. I don't think I'll ever get it again. And because she did that, and from the beginning, there was things that I was pushing for, and she was like not sure about. She was like, oh, is that going to work? And I was like, oh yeah, it's going to work. It's going to be brilliant. But I just felt that I could do whatever I wanted, really. And I'd never had it before, so it was kind of like, oh, am I okay to do this? And just kind of went for it. And I really enjoyed the whole process of making Black and Welsh. And in the end, I still have the spreadsheet. You know, there was over 80 people that we found. The majority were in Cardiff, just because that's where I'm from, and you know, that's where the majority of the Black community would be from in Wales. But looking outside of that made the documentary so much better, I think.
Yeah, having those kind of rural subjects as well really added kind of extra layers to the piece. And also, I think those wides, it makes complete sense, because you kind of get this really nice kind of, you know, you've got like a fresh, airy sense of what's going on.
Yeah.
And just like the approach to, you know, the editing decisions and the sort of rhythm of it, the pace of it is great. So you get those wides, and then you're able to go into these very kind of internal landscapes of each character. Just, it works really, really well.
We really wanted this documentary to be celebratory from the beginning. It was all about celebration. I think, you know, it's a very easy thing to do when you're talking about being Black, and you can instantly go to racism, and we can all talk all day about it. And I think that is really important, that we can be open to talk about it. But this is about being Black and Welsh and celebrating both those things. So I really wanted to do that first, actually. That was really important. We all had stories that we could talk about, which were not very nice, you know, and we did explore that in the documentary. But, you know, if we had more time, we would have probably explored them a bit more, to be honest. We could have had a bit on colorism, which was really, really interesting. One of the actors in it, Alexandra Riley, spoke about that so eloquently. It's not in the documentary, but that was something which was in it for a long time, you know, and then we ended up taking out just because of time. But yeah, the edit was really amazing, and I got to work with a really cool editor. He just moved from London to Cardiff, actually, and he's mixed race himself, and not Black, but he's not Black, like if, oh no, not Black, but no, he's a mixed race person. And I think for me, that's what made the team really unique. You know, the producer was also mixed race, and I just working with that amount of diversity was fantastic for me personally, and I think it made the documentary a lot better. The editor was fantastic, honestly. Like, he, from the very beginning, when we spoke, I said, look, we need to make something which doesn't look like it was made for BBC Wales. And he was like, okay, cool. And that's not, I mean, I suppose it kind of is a bit of an insult to BBC Wales, because, you know, a lot of the time they were making very dated programming, and they've changed that around a lot in recent years. And because of the commissioner we had, she pushed us to make these great ideas come to light. And I think the editor helped that a lot, and the producer.
Yeah, it just seems like a great kind of collaborative moment where, you know, the planets align.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can happen. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. But two things that you mentioned which hit me straight away. But first off, the twins. It kind of blew my mind. That sequence was just out of this world. I mean, naturally, I think twins have this kind of other thing going on anyway. But the kind of almost sort of telepathic emotion, I think that was really quite a unique moment to capture.
Yeah, it was really hard as well, because obviously we still had the social distance, you know, and I've known those girls since they were born, you know, so it was awful to see them cry and not hug them, because that was what I wanted to do. Their mum was in another room within earshot, but that day it was so windy that she couldn't hear what was going on, and I didn't know until after the interview. I thought she could hear everything. And they were really brave and really honest. And actually, before it was I think it was the day of, or the day before it was being broadcast, they said to their mum, oh, please tell me they're not going to use the bit where I was crying. And she was like, yeah, she is. And she was like, why? And she's like, because it's really important, you know.
Yes.
I had to show their mum that bit before it went out.
Of course.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a really special moment. It was
very much so. I think it's just that for me, those are the moments that make documentary film a really unique form of storytelling and sort of communicative consciousness raiser as a form of art, and as a kind of a form of informing people about what's going on in the world and the human condition. And I just think that moment really captures that. It's one of those, it's I think those are the sort of rare things you don't expect to happen, but happen and kind of inform the work in a very sort of different way. And then there was something else which I thought was really important, and it's a conversation I've had with a few Black and brown creatives recently. And I think it's a very, very important one moving forward, which is sometimes we don't have to focus on racism to tell Black and brown stories. You know, why can't we just tell stories about us that you know, we know what that is. You know, we were thrust and born into that. So maybe sometimes we can celebrate and just tell stories about two people falling in love, or a group of friends that go to climb the Himalayas, or, you know, it doesn't have to, we don't have to be limited through this particular lens of experience.
I think so. And I think that's why actually we got a huge response from non-Black people in Wales. One tweet specifically said that they didn't realize they had racist thoughts until they watched it. And then, because then you're just like us, do you know what I mean? And it was like, wow. And that someone tweeted that publicly. This is not an inbox message. And that for me was just like, you know, just owning up to that publicly is a huge deal, for one. And I wanted everyone to watch this and just enjoy it, really. But I didn't. Gaynor actually sent me a text message after it was broadcast, and she said, I can't remember what words she said, but she said something like, it was fantastic and it was very Black. And, you know, like, that meant a lot to me, actually, because I made this for the Black community, but I wanted everyone to enjoy it, you know, like it had to be universal, especially because it was broadcast in Wales, right? You know, so it had to be. But the fact that, you know, I had little things in it like patois and I didn't have subtitles on it, that was like such a small, tiny win for me, because I just didn't want to have to subtitle it. And he didn't explain what he said, but I just thought, oh, they're going to tell me to take that out. They're going to tell me to take it out. But they didn't. They left it in. And I thought that was really nice, because it was part of his identity, you know.
Pieces of work like this are a step in the right direction. What I love about it is that it speaks and celebrates specifically the community that you're from, but then it also translates to other diasporic communities, and then it opens up very much in the example that you gave us about that individual tweeting online and having to kind of have a self-reckoning, you know, and that's I think that's the power of art. I think that's the moment where, you know, you've made something that's speaking on all of these different, you know, it's communicating on a number of different levels.
It's nice. It's really nice. I felt very, well, I am very proud of it, but it was the response, I think, from a lot of different people, which was an amazing feeling, you know, to have. So I'm really happy with it.
You mentioned the Black and Scottish piece, and it's really interesting because I'd written here, I was just thinking, because I remember ending just sort of being, number one, overwhelmed, and sort of everything we've just talked about, just being really kind of hit by that in the best possible way, and a range of emotions, which is what I feel you really want from the moving image, you know. But I'd written down here, like, I was like, are you going to make this into a regional series? This could be different communities, visual diasporic tapestry of Blackness and Black communities in England. If someone was to pitch it to you, would you want to sort of possibly think about exploring it in you know, focusing on other communities, or do you feel it's a kind of like a standalone, or maybe even exploring the community a bit further down the line, or from a different perspective?
Well, actually, Stewart, the director of Black and Scottish, is doing exactly that. So
wow.
he approached me after Black and Welsh was commissioned, and he said, "Oh, I really wanted to like do it in different locations." And he's doing one in Northern Ireland, so that's the next one that he's doing, which I think is going to be fantastic. And you know, I definitely feel like it could be a fantastic series, and it will be. I'm sure that he's looking at different locations. I think what I think is probably quite unique about mine and Stuart's film is that we are from those we are from that country. You know, I'm Welsh, he's Scottish, and I think having someone who's from that place as part of the film really makes it extra. You know, it'll really make the documentary. So I think that's what he's doing. He plans on doing that. So yeah, and I'm here for it. I love it. I love hearing these different accents and just being shocked. Like, you know, when you meet your first like Black Scottish person, you're like, whoa, this is incredible. You know,
yeah,
I used to get it all the time in London.
Yeah. And there's a question a little bit further down the line which relates to that as well.
Okay.
But I just want to kind of like sort of wheel it back a bit, and I just kind of ask you, you know, like I'm so happy to kind of joyously big up your film and kind of celebrate it as well, just even in this moment. But I kind of want to rewind back and sort of say, here you are now in this moment. What led you into a career in film and TV?
Oh, I didn't get onto an acting course.
Where did that begin? Really?
Didn't get, yeah. Yeah. I would never be making documentaries if I had got into the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama. I would never. You know, I always wanted to be basically the female Spike Lee. Like, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to do an acting course and then do a master's in film production and then make my films and put myself in it, because I just thought, how else am I going to get cast in this here UK when you know, there's not many Black British actors who are in British productions. It's definitely at the time, you know. And I just thought, well, I'll just do a Spike Lee and make my own films and put myself in it. And then I didn't get on the course, so I was on like the waiting list for the whole summer. And then I didn't get on, and I was like, okay, this was not meant to happen. And I'd already studied musical theatre in London. I did a year in London, and then decided I wanted to do acting and not musical theatre. So I was like, what am I going to do in my life? And I thought, let me look at some film schools through clearing universities. And at the time, to be honest with you, I had no idea really on the types of courses I should have been looking for to make fiction films. And then I saw Newport University, and bearing in mind, I never wanted to go to university. It never appealed to me. But anyway, I went through clearing and I saw the description which said, if you like talking to people, this course is for you. And then the title was documentary, and I thought, they're really boring.
Oh, what is this? Yeah. What is this?
But I called them anyway. I called the lecturer anyway, and I spoke to him, and then I thought, all right, I'll just do it for a year, keep myself busy. And I already had an acting agent in Cardiff, not like big star agent, but I did. And I was still like audition and stuff at the time for that year. And then I thought, maybe I do like making docs. So then I finished that documentary, and I finished with two 15-minute documentaries I made for my final films. One was about dancehall, a dancehall competition in Italy, and the other one was about Jukebox Juniors, which are a dance crew from Cardiff. And then I went on to make a 30-minute documentary about Jukebox Juniors, and that was my first credit as a filmmaker. My first TV credit was that for CBBC, and it went on BBC Wales as well. Yeah, so that's kind of how brilliant. I got into it. And then I moved to London because I just thought that's where you need to go. And I'd always been obsessed with it. I loved London.
So Liana, what I love about that, and what strikes me about that is you are where you are because you have done you know, whereas so many people kind of, I mean, I did the opposite. I kind of like, you know, there's a similarity of like, you know, I wanted to act and I tried to do that, and then that doesn't work out, and then this happens, and I kind of just took this really long winding path. But what I love about your experience is that you've gone, right, I'm going to do that. What's that? I'm going to go and do it. And I think there's nothing more important than that kind of learning by doing. And I just love the way it's like, you know, that led to that, that led to that. And then before you know it, CBeebies, and that's a foot in the door. And then it's like, well, right, now it's time to go up to London and experience that and see what that's all about. Bearing that in mind, the question would be, now that you've been in London for the amount of time that you have thus far, and there is no pun intended in a Welsh way, but is the grass greener? I mean, do you think that's what young Black women, young mixed race women who are trying to pursue this career, do you think, I mean, I know I'm saying this hypothetically because obviously everybody's different, right? But do you think that's actually quite an important thing, to just sort of test the water and see if it works?
Well, you know what? I was doing work experience at BBC Wales before I came to London, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was working in the post-production department. And he said to me, what do you want to do? And I was like, oh, I want to go to London. And he was like, that's the advice I give you. He said, go to London. If you don't like it, you can always come back home. He said, but he went to London, worked here for years, then came back and then got a top job. And I thought, do you know what? He's got a point there. But I'd always wanted to live in London. You know, I've always been a huge fan of movies, and I'd always watch, you know, the rags to riches story. And not that I wanted to be rich, but just thought that I could make that journey, you know, and then be something. And so I've been here for like 11 years now, and I'm very happy I came here. I just love big cities, and I don't feel like you said, I don't think this is everyone's journey. You know, Wales, Cardiff is home. It's a beautiful place, and it's got a community there, which I love. But for me, the only reason why I got to make Black and White was because of the experience I'd achieved in London. You know, that was the first time I'd ever worked for a Welsh company.
Oh, okay.
Was last year, you know. So I don't think I would have gained that level of experience working on the productions I've worked on in Wales. So, you know, you come here, then you've worked with all of the kind of known productions, or for the known executive producers or commissioners. And then, you know, it's a bit easier to work anywhere else, I think.
So do you think it's about taking the opportunity? I mean, once you have had an opportunity to get some work out there, do you think it literally, the geographical experience of being in London gives you the opportunity to kind of be closer as those known production companies, producers, etc., etc.
Well, because at the time when I moved,
what I'm trying to say, because what the other thing I like very much, because a few other friends and creatives have said this too, and it strikes me that your kind of mantra and your approach has been the same, which is kind of like, and it's kind of like what the guy in Wales had said to you before you made the leap. You know, well, if you go and try it, I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You know, because at least if you go and try it, you've tried it. You can always come home and pursue a career in, with local production companies. But would you say, whilst you've got the opportunity to try, might as well try?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And, you know, like at the same time, now times are different. Yeah, now you can make stuff on your phone. So I think now people are feeling they don't need to come to the city, especially now during like COVID. You know, we want to hear more from regional voices, and we should do. And even though I still believe that most of the powers that be live in London, in regards to the TV industry specifically, they are keen to tell more regional stories. I just think that instead of getting Londoners to work in the regions, you know, we can build people within the regions to tell their own stories. You know, even with Black and Welsh, you know, I don't know any other Black female directors there. I don't actually know any other Black sort of documentary directors in Wales, but if there are any, you know, no one knows who they are in the TV sort of world. I'm sure there are some, you know, even if they're budding directors, let's help them grow. You know, they shouldn't have to move to London. Although I will always like share my love of London because it's fantastic.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really expensive, you know.
I think that's part of it, isn't it? It's trying to sort of navigate this stuff in a positive way, because I mean, it's so refreshing to hear you saying what you've said, Liana, because it's sort of, we want to be able to champion the regional creative hubs that we're from, and we're kind of rooting for, and the stories and creatives and communities that don't get as much of a chance to kind of tell their stories and express themselves. And what I like is, I find it refreshing that you're saying that there, you know, it's encouraging to hear that it's like people are interested in regional stories.
Yeah.
And at the same time, kind of like, you know, go to the capital if you feel energized by that. I think it's this thing of being open to things, isn't it? And assessing where you can find balance, or where, you know, what the appropriate journey is going to be to help you on your path to getting your work out there.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of directors, documentary directors who make their first film, it's usually where they live. You know, I did. And that's one of my favorite films I've ever made. And then 10 years later, I go back and make Black and Welsh, and that again is one of my favorite films I've ever made. So, you know, there's something about making the film in the country or the city where you're from, or town where you're from, you know. I think you just put that little bit extra into it.
There's only a few questions left.
That's all right.
Thank you so much for you know, being so giving and sharing your experiences with us. And these are kind of like fun questions at the end, because I'm also aware that, you know, sometimes with these things, I think particularly for people of color, when we're unpacking the kind of work that we do and some of the themes and issues around how we approach the subjects that we're trying to, you know, make sense of, or speak truth to power, or, you know, it can get a bit kind of, there's a kind of discharge of energy that can affect us in particular ways. So I wanted the last few questions to just be like fun, upbeat ones, you know. Are you interested? I mean, you were just talking about the cameras that you've been working with. What cameras are you most comfortable with? And stills photography. Are you interested in stills photography? You know, telling your particular style of storytelling is still something that you're all.
I mean, I like taking photos. I wouldn't say that I'm brilliant at it. But yeah, it's something I've been meaning to do a photography course for a number of years now. And I think it really helped my camera work, actually. I think the best camera operators were once photographers first.
I definitely think there's a kind of you know, there's an interdisciplinary exchange going on.
Yeah, for sure. You know, you'll understand the camera much better. Whereas I've always said it's story first for me. I still want it to look really good. And I think knowing more about photography will
Mm.
help that. You know, I only really became really confident with trying new things stylistically the last couple of years, you know, the last 2 years probably. And I've been doing this for, you know, 11 years.
Yeah. I mean, Liana, I think, I mean, what have found really interesting over the years is both of those approaches are equally as important as each other. And I think as filmmakers grow and evolve, they'll lean towards either sides of, you know, it's never a polemic thing, but I think both things inform each other. So I'm most excited about filmmakers that say story first.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, photographic discipline, you know, because I think sometimes you can see films which are technically beautiful, but they're aesthetically beautiful, there's no heart. And then sometimes you can see work which is the other way. So I don't think there's an either one is better or worse than the other. I think they're things that totally inform. And I think that's what gives each individual filmmaker their own kind of unique, you know, stylistic approach, trademark, so to speak.
And I use a Sony FS7, so I bought a second-hand one last year, and it was the best thing I've ever done, because now I have the freedom to just make stuff whenever I want. I can collaborate with people, you know, I can do things voluntarily if I want, which is what I intend to do, you know, and that's the beauty of it. You know, when I get jobs, I can hire it out with me, and then it pays for itself after a while, and then, you know, you can pay it forward to people. And I must say, I'm really impressed with like the new generation of filmmakers, you know, because there's something quite special about them, and I hope the powers that be can give them more of a chance, you know, because they are the future, you know. And I think that online is of course the future here, and TV TV is going to be a dinosaur one day, you know. So let's listen to the kids.
Yes, I think, very, very true. Back to what you said a second ago around story is important to you. As a observational story-led documentary filmmaker, what kind of stories are you attracted to? What are the themes that you gravitate towards?
I guess like
you know, when there is an opportunity.
I think it's overcoming adversity, you know, is seeing someone who goes on a journey to achieve something, whether that be, I don't know, like a dance competition, overcoming an addiction, an activist trying to achieve something. I love those kind of stories. It doesn't mean you have to get there in the end, but the journey is the interesting thing for me, you know. Like actually seeing change. To get change, there has to be a journey, right? And I think that's a beautiful thing. And you know, there's a lot of times where I wish I followed a story, because at the time I was interested, but then thought, you know, I'm doing other things, and then that story's become more interesting over time, you know. And now I have a camera, I really want to do that, even if that's a slow burn documentary that I do for myself over a few years' time, you know, not commissioned. It's just something that I'm passionate about. I think that's what sometimes happens when you work in TV. You know, you work on less and less projects which you're passionate about, because you're working. Essentially, it is a job, you know, and it's an absolute privilege to work in this industry, but it does pay the bills. So I think for me personally, you can get a bit lost in it because you're in this industry and it's like, you're so privileged to be here. And then it's like, actually, what am I passionate about? What stories do I want to actually tell? You know, and then before you know it, it's like 10 years in and it's like, oh, I better do this now, you know? So yeah, this is why I'm like really excited about some of the younger people coming through, new directors who are really putting their stamp on their documentaries, and they're not always for broadcast on TV. They're short form, and short form is really exciting.
Yeah, yes, definitely. It's just such a you can do so much so quickly with short form and really make an impression. I always like that. It's just because it's something that cropped up recently and something I was researching and writing about. But and it's a bit of a cheesy quote, but I always like that David Lynch idea about, you know, the fish, and sort of that idea of, you know, a really good idea is like a big fish that's sort of deep within the pond of the lake, and if you wait long enough, the fish will come to the surface. You know, the ideas will come to the surface. And I think there's so I think they're mutually beneficial approaches, working sort of fast and kind of, and also those ideas that you've got in the back of your mind, and like, one day I'll get around to telling that story, and allowing those things to grow, you know. And as you were talking about young filmmakers and kind of your excitement around what young filmmakers have to offer if given the opportunity to express themselves, are there any kind of qualities that you would say are important for a filmmaker or a producer on their way up that
I'd say
stand
passion.
out to you?
Passion. When people are passionate about something, you know. I give this example a lot because this happened last year. I did something similar for a friend of mine in Cardiff. It was a Zoom, and there was a few kind of people on it who were interested in filmmaking, or who were students or were interested in it. And I said in that, if you should contact people and email them and say, this is what I want to do, and don't be afraid to do that, you know. And the person who did not speak during that, let's just call it a masterclass, emailed me afterwards, and that person ended up working with me on Black and Welsh and on another project. And that person is not the most, you know, they are not the biggest character, you know. They weren't the most confident, but let me tell you, they were so talented. It was extraordinary to watch, because I was really excited about how far they're going to go in the next few years. And that person just sent me an email and just said, this is what I want to do, sent me their CV. I remembered them because of that. So don't be afraid to reach out to people who you believe can help you on your journey, number one. And also whose work you like. If you email, honestly, like, people, directors, execs do not get emails all the time telling them how brilliant their work is. So when they get that email, I think they will respond. And if they don't respond, no one knows you sent that email. Nobody knows, okay? But that's my big thing.
I wish I knew this when I was younger.
Honestly,
all
you
this
just have
is
to
so
do
important.
it.
Because what's gonna happen, right? What's gonna happen? I mean, the worst that can happen is that it's a no for the time being.
Yeah. And also, you know, I'd say do that with a few people. Just email them and just be like, hey, this is what I want to do. Share your film. All of us have started out once where you are. All of us have. So, you know, I used to go around showing people my show reel, which was actually rubbish if I look back on it. But at the time, I just wanted people to know how passionate I was. And just look at me, look, this is what I want to do. And that's how I got my opportunities in telly, was because people thought, this girl will not give up. I emailed one guy and said, I loved your hip hop series. It was fantastic. I used it in my dissertation. And that's how I got my first job on a production called Edwardian Farm.
Brilliant.
You know?
But brilliant. I'm so glad you're saying what you've said, because these are similar experiences to friends and other directors, and their experiences are very similar. Of kind of, if you don't try and keep trying, you know, we can't sort of expect things to just sort of drop out of the sky. And, you know, it's that thing of just being open to it, be open to it, go for it, why not? You know,
Yeah.
we only live once, and there is a world of opportunity out there if we keep, you know, developing what we want to do and how we want to do it.
Yeah. And look, it's important to say as well, you know, I'm not someone who came from money. I'm not someone who had a camera. And, you know, I found a bursary I could apply to buy a camera.
Yeah.
And I only got that because I wasn't earning hardly anything at the time, you know. And because I think I might have even been on benefits at the time. And that's how I got the camera. So, you know, there are ways you can reach out and you can get things. But I think the easiest and cheapest thing to do is to send an email to someone, and that way, once that email's sent, if they don't reply, cool, you move on to the next one. You know, it doesn't cost anything. It really doesn't.
Yeah. Yes. Final questions. Final questions. We're almost there. I promise. We're almost... It was, you know what it was? It was the final question. It's right at the beginning, and it was just that moment of the need, and it fits it. I told you it kind of come full cycle. We'd get there, and this is kind of, we're wrapping up. We're very close to wrapping up. I'm so glad it's worked out this way, because it has sort of, we've put the jigsaw puzzle together, and it's the need for networking, like-minded creatives. And I would say that across the board. So maybe there's something about talking about this need for networking in a community of like-minded creatives when you get to a certain place within your career. I don't think it really matters whereabouts you are within that journey. And then also maybe something around the specific need for networking for Black people, for Black creatives, and creatives of color. I mean, the distinction is sort of like between a support network and like a professional network, you know, because I think they are two slightly different things, but they do blur occasionally. Because I mean, I can certainly think of a handful of friends who I know if I'm feeling really low about certain things or certain experiences, at least I know I can kind of call those guys up, or message them and say, oh, this crazy stuff happened today, or I'm looking at this, you know, pitch that I'd sent or something, or this doesn't add up, and it feels like it could possibly be around ABCD, without naming names or anything. It happened recently with another mixed race creative friend of mine. I'm not mentioning names. I'm looking at my camera, sort of going, "Don't worry, I'm not going to say who you are." But around like a bursary application, it was really around like language and what to say. And I think sometimes if those networking things are, if you don't have anyone that you can talk to, it can be quite a lonely, a lonely path, a lonely journey. I mean, if you don't mind me asking, I mean, have you had similar experiences around finding like a networking circle of like-minded people?
In your tribe? Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, I went for years without one because actually I was just working a lot, and to be honest, you just kind of pack these experiences away for another day, and then you soon realize that, you know, it's getting a bit full. There's a lot going on in there. And then as soon as you see someone else who's Black, you both share these stories, and then it's like, and then once that happens a few times, you're like, this is only happening when I'm speaking to someone else who's Black in the industry specifically, you know. A lot of things my mum, my sister, who I'm really close to, just didn't know what was going on, you know, had no idea, because I just wouldn't talk about it. So now I do have that, and it's just in the form of people who I might not have even ever worked with. I've met one of them once, you know, and they're an amazingly talented Black director. And anyway, we have this WhatsApp group. I'm on 2 WhatsApp groups, and these kind of form quite organically, you know, word of mouth. Oh, you should join this one. And And then there's also organizations out there, like the first one I came across was called TV Collective in London. It's quite big now, but at the time I was at a networking event in the BBC. It was before I'd even had my first job in London. And so I was just trying to find anything to go to, everything and anything. And it was for ethnic minorities, basically. And so I went there, and then there was this woman with these long dreadlocks, and I was just like, oh my gosh, if she can work in telly, so can I. And I needed that visual of someone who was so unique in telly. If she could do it, I can too. And she actually runs the TV Collective, and she actually helped me a lot with empowerment to begin with. Not that she spent a lot of time with me, but it was just seeing how she was moving and what she was achieving. And
yes,
I think it's tough because sometimes you don't see a lot of Black people on the productions you'll be on. But at the beginning, when I first started out, you know, I was just applying for lots of things, and you know, because of these opportunities for ethnic minorities to get into the industry, I happened to meet a lot of Black people, Black and Asian people, you know, and therefore you build this friendship, and you know, it doesn't mean you're besties, but it definitely means that you can call on people to share your experience.
Yeah, a shared experience, a shared kind of awareness of what the potential pitfalls.
Yeah, but now, you know,
that lie ahead
now there's loads.
Before you. Yeah.
Now there's loads, you know, like I think, and regional things as well, not just in London. A lot of things are online now, which is great. And, you know, a lot of young people are, you know, they wouldn't be like, you know, I was fearful to say anything when I was younger in TV, you know, or you'd think you were the one in the wrong. Whereas now I think we have a lot more awareness, and, you know, there's no time or space for ignorance anymore. Not that it doesn't still happen, but I think the younger generation are really not having it anymore, and I applaud them for it.
Which is good to hear.
You know, yeah, it's fantastic. It's really, really good. But it still doesn't mean that they won't come across certain experiences.
Yes.
But yeah, you know, there's people out there who can support you, and you know, there's a lot of us here who are trying to really empower and nurture younger talent, because there's a lot of us who end up leaving the industry, and we don't want that to happen, especially with some of these amazing young people. And just because they're diverse, it doesn't mean that they have to struggle.
Oh, that's reassuring this is certainly music to my ears, because it took me so long to kind of eventually get to navigate to sort of where I am now, and to know that there are support networks out there. It's incredibly reassuring, because I think so many people are put off from their chosen career paths due to a handful of bad experiences that just can potentially just ruin someone's future, you know, life experience and career path. It's just, the hope is that things are moving in a kind of appropriate direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Liana, final question. And it's a question. I'm saying final question, but it's a question split into two. So it's basically, it might lead into the same thing. So potential dream project. And is there anything that you're working on at the moment that you might be able to share, just like a little bit about? Don't worry if not. If it's super top secret, then that's cool. But
my dream project. Do you know, I'd probably love to make something in Jamaica. I know exactly what it is, but I don't want to give it away. But
don't give it away. Don't give it away.
I would love to do something that I would love to follow a certain story in Jamaica. And I have to be brave enough to just go for it and write the pitch and stuff. But that would be something I'd love to do, because I think it's a story which maybe a lot of people of Jamaican heritage or who enjoy a certain type of Jamaican music would know about, but also people who don't know about it would love the story. I think it's one of those stories where, yeah, it would be a Netflix one. I think a really good Netflix series. And what was the other question?
Is there anything
what am I working on?
Yeah.
I can't really say what I'm doing a Channel 4 news documentary right this minute about long COVID, which will be out in the next 2 weeks. But
wow,
that's just a short one as part of the news. But my next project, I don't know what it's going to be yet. So I was working on one for Channel 4, which was paused last month. And I can't even share that because it wasn't actually released yet, but that would be a fun one. But yeah, hopefully something really good.
Yeah. Cool. Liana, thank you so much for being patient with my rambling questions and just being so
it's usually me doing that.
Being so giving with your time and your insight and experiences. Deeply grateful for that, and wishing you all the successes and accolades in the future, because I think you're kind of like you're on your journey, and wishing you all the best, and thank you very much for sharing your time with us. I think just finally to say a big thank you to Gary Thompson, Cables and Cameras, BFI Network, and Ffilm Cymru Wales, and Liana Stewart. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.